You wake up. You check your phone. A headline catches your eye, outrageous, shocking, perfectly designed to grab your attention. You scroll further. Ads tailored just for you. A notification from a social media app you didn't even plan to open. Before you know it, you've lost 30 minutes, maybe an hour. Was that your choice? Or were you guided? The unsettling truth is that your mind is being manipulated every single day. Not through obvious lies or force, but through subtle, almost invisible techniques, ones you don't even notice happening. How do politicians get you to vote a certain way without you realizing? How do advertisers make you crave things you never needed? And how do people in your life, friends, partners, even strangers, use these same tactics to control you without you ever questioning it? What if free will isn't what we think it is? Tonight, we're diving deep into the hidden playbook of cognitive manipulation, the techniques used to shape your choices, shift your beliefs, and make you act without realizing why. The deeper we go, the more disturbing it gets. Because once you start seeing the strings, you'll never look at the world the same way again. The human brain is a masterpiece of efficiency, wired to process vast amounts of information quickly, filter out the unnecessary, and make snap decisions. But this efficiency comes at a cost. Our brains rely on shortcuts, patterns, biases, and subconscious cues that help us navigate the world. And these very shortcuts are what make us so easy to manipulate. Every day, without realizing it, we are being influenced, not just by advertisers and politicians, but by the very way our brains are designed to function. Take cognitive ease, the phenomenon where we trust information that feels familiar, easy to understand, or repeated often. If a message is simple, if it flows effortlessly into our thoughts, we assume it must be true. Then there's dopamine, the brain's reward chemical. Every notification, every click, every moment of validation triggers a tiny hit of dopamine, reinforcing behaviors and creating unconscious habits. Social media, marketing, even political messaging, they all weaponize dopamine to keep us engaged, to make ideas stick. And then there's fear. When we are afraid, the logical part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, takes a back seat. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, takes over. It primes us for action, makes us more reactive and less skeptical. This is why fear is one of the most powerful tools of influence. It doesn't just make us alert, it makes us compliant. But influence doesn't always come from external forces. Our own past experiences shape our perception, often in ways we don't even recognize. A single bad encounter can create a lifelong bias. A deeply held belief can filter out contradictory evidence before we're even aware of it. Our emotions, anger, joy, nostalgia, become invisible hands guiding our decisions. The scariest part? The more we believe we are immune to influence, the more vulnerable we actually are. Because true influence isn't about forcing a choice. It's about making you think it was yours all along. You remember something clearly, word for word, moment for moment. But then someone tells you, that never happened. You pause. Did you misunderstand? Did you imagine it? Slowly, the doubt creeps in. Maybe you're overreacting. Maybe you're being too sensitive. And just like that, reality starts to slip. This is gaslighting, one of the most insidious mind games ever created. It doesn't happen all at once. It's slow, methodical, a steady drip of denial, misdirection, and emotional manipulation designed to make you doubt your own memory, your own judgment, your own mind. At first, it's small. A lie so subtle you second-guess yourself. A contradiction that doesn't seem important until it happens again, and again, and again. A partner twisting their words, I never said that. A boss rewriting history, you're remembering it wrong. A politician spinning the facts, that was never the case. And over time, your grip on reality weakens. You start to apologize for things that weren't your fault. You feel guilty for questioning things that don't make sense. You rely on the manipulator more and more, because they seem to be the only source of truth. That's the real horror of gaslighting. It doesn't just change what you believe. It changes who you are. And once someone controls your perception of reality, they control you. But what makes gaslighting so powerful? And why do people fall for it, even when the truth is right in front of them? Imagine walking into a store and seeing a watch priced at $5,000. It's extravagant, far beyond what you'd ever consider. Then, right next to it, you see another watch for $700. Suddenly, it doesn't seem so bad. It almost feels like a bargain. But here's the truth. That first number, the $5,000, was never meant to be realistic. It was meant to anchor you, to make everything that comes after seem reasonable by comparison. This is the anchoring effect, one of the most powerful, yet invisible, psychological tricks that shape our decisions. The first piece of information we encounter becomes the foundation for everything that follows. It doesn't matter if that number is random, meaningless, or even completely false. Once it's in your head, it skews your judgment. In salary negotiations, the first offer thrown on the table sets the tone. A high opening bid makes the final agreement land higher. A lower one drags expectations down. In courtrooms, studies have shown that when jurors hear an extreme sentence suggestion, even if it's absurd, they unconsciously adjust their own sentencing expectations around it. A 30-year prison recommendation makes a 10-year sentence feel lenient, even if the crime doesn't warrant it. But here's the most unsettling part. Anchors don't just shape financial decisions. They warp how we perceive reality itself. Let's say a news report tells you that crime has increased by 300%. That sounds terrifying. But what if the baseline was just one crime last year, and now there are 4? The number 300% has already anchored you to a feeling of crisis before you even know the real context. Or consider relationships. If someone tells you from the start, you're overreacting, this is normal, that becomes your anchor. Over time, your mind adjusts to that baseline, even if it's far from the truth. What once seemed unacceptable starts to feel ordinary. So can you ever escape an anchor once it's set? The answer is almost never. Once that first number, that first idea, that first impression takes hold, it reshapes your perception without you even realizing it. The only defense? To recognize when an anchor is being planted. Because the moment you accept the first number you hear, the game has already begun, and you're playing by someone else's rules. Imagine 2 headlines reporting the same event. Brave protesters demand justice in the streets. Rioters cause chaos and destruction in the city. Same event, same people, but the way the story is framed completely changes how you feel about it. This is the power of framing. Framing doesn't change the facts, it changes how you see the facts. It's a psychological filter that manipulates perception without you even realizing it. Governments use it. The difference between a revolution and a coup is just a matter of perspective. Businesses use it. Would you rather buy meat that's 90% lean or one that contains 10% fat? They mean the same thing, but one sounds far more appealing. Media outlets use it. A politician can either be fighting for reform or recklessly dismantling the system. Same actions, entirely different emotions. Framing works because the human brain doesn't process information objectively. It absorbs context first, then fills in the gaps based on emotion, bias, and expectation. It's why an apology can feel genuine or manipulative depending on how it's worded. It's why two people can witness the same event and walk away with opposite conclusions. It's why the truth can be twisted, stretched, and reshaped without ever being technically false. Because once a frame is set, everything inside it makes sense. And if someone else controls the frame, they control what you believe. Imagine walking into a store and seeing a watch priced at $5,000. It's extravagant, far beyond what you'd ever consider. Then, right next to it, you see another watch for $700. Suddenly, it doesn't seem so bad. It almost feels like a bargain. But here's the truth. That first number, the $5,000, was never meant to be realistic. It was meant to anchor you, to make everything that comes after seem reasonable by comparison. This is the anchoring effect, one of the most powerful, yet invisible, psychological tricks that shape our decisions. The first piece of information we encounter becomes the foundation for everything that follows. It doesn't matter if that number is random, meaningless, or even completely false. Once it's in your head, it skews your judgment. In salary negotiations, the first offer thrown on the table sets the tone. A high opening bid makes the final agreement land higher. A lower one drags expectations down. In courtrooms, studies have shown that when jurors hear an extreme sentence suggestion, even if it's absurd, they unconsciously adjust their own sentencing expectations around it. A 30-year prison recommendation makes a 10-year sentence feel lenient, even if the crime doesn't warrant it. But here's the most unsettling part. Anchors don't just shape financial decisions. They warp how we perceive reality itself. Let's say a news report tells you that crime has increased by 300%. That sounds terrifying. But what if the baseline was just one crime last year, and now there are 4? The number 300% has already anchored you to a feeling of crisis before you even know the real context. Or consider relationships. If someone tells you from the start, you're overreacting, this is normal, that becomes your anchor. Over time, your mind adjusts to that baseline, even if it's far from the truth. What once seemed unacceptable starts to feel ordinary. So can you ever escape an anchor once it's set? The answer is almost never. Once that first number, that first idea, that first impression takes hold, it reshapes your perception without you even realizing it. The only defense? To recognize when an anchor is being planted. Because the moment you accept the first number you hear, the game has already begun, and you're playing by someone else's rules. In 1957, moviegoers sat in dark theaters, unaware of the experiment happening before their eyes. Between frames of the film, a message flashed for just a fraction of a second, too fast to consciously notice. Drink Coca-Cola. Eat popcorn. The result? Supposedly, snack sales skyrocketed. This was one of the first major claims about subliminal messaging. The idea that hidden words, images, or sounds can bypass your awareness and directly influence your decisions. But was it real? Years later, the researcher admitted to fabricating his results. Yet, despite this, the power of subliminal influence was far from disproven. Studies since then have shown that subtle priming, words or images flashed too quickly to notice, can affect behavior in shocking ways. In one experiment, people exposed to words related to aging, like wrinkled and bingo, walked slower afterward, without realizing why. In another, individuals shown images of smiling faces before drinking a beverage reported liking it more. Today, subliminal messaging is everywhere, woven into advertising, marketing, and even political campaigns. A logo's shape, a product's placement, a phrase repeated just enough to stick in your mind. The human brain absorbs more than we consciously realize. And that raises the question, how many of your thoughts are truly yours? You see the same headline 3 times in a day. A friend mentions it. A social media post reinforces it. By the time you hear it again on the news, it feels true. This is the illusory truth effect. The unsettling reality that repetition alone can make a lie feel like a fact. The brain isn't built to fact-check every piece of information it encounters. Instead, it takes shortcuts. If something sounds familiar, it feels safer. And if it feels safer, it feels true. This trick is why propaganda works. It's why advertisers repeat slogans endlessly. It's why political campaigns push the same message across every platform. They don't need new facts, just the same claim, repeated enough times until it settles into your subconscious. And here's the most disturbing part. Even when people learn the truth, they often stick to the falsehood. The original claim has emotional weight. The correction? Just a footnote. A well-placed lie, repeated enough times, doesn't just become believable. It becomes undeniable. You're walking through a dimly lit hallway when suddenly, an alarm blares. Your heart races, your senses sharpen, and for a moment, nothing else matters except escaping the danger. Fear does that. It shuts down rational thought. It makes you react. Now imagine this reaction being used against you, not for survival, but for control. Politicians use fear to win votes. If you don't support us, disaster is inevitable. Cults use fear to keep followers obedient. Leave, and you'll be lost forever. Advertisers use fear to push products. Without this insurance, your future is uncertain. Fear is the ultimate motivator, overriding logic and making you act before you can think. Then there's guilt. Manipulators frame choices in ways that make you feel responsible for something beyond your control. If you don't do this, you're selfish. Good people would make the right choice. Hope, too, can be a weapon. When someone convinces you that salvation, whether financial, emotional, or spiritual, is just one step away, you'll do almost anything to reach it. Governments, religions, sales tactics, personal relationships. The cycle is the same. Fear makes you anxious. Guilt makes you compliant. Hope keeps you trapped. And the deeper question remains, when you make a decision, are you really choosing or just reacting? A clock ticks down on a website. Only 2 left in stock. Your heart rate spikes. You weren't even sure if you wanted it, but now you need it. This is the scarcity principle, the psychological trick that makes us crave what seems rare even when it's not. Our brains are wired for survival, and in a world where resources were once limited, missing out could mean disaster. But today, marketers, social dynamics, and even relationships exploit this instinct to control behavior. It's why limited time offers never really end. It's why luxury brands restrict supply, not because they can't make more, but because exclusivity fuels desire. It's why social scarcity, like being ignored or ghosted, makes people chase after those who pull away. The fear of losing something often outweighs the actual need for it. And once scarcity takes hold, rational thought disappears. What was once a choice becomes an urge. The question is, how often has this trick made you act without realizing it? A crisp suit, a confident voice, a simple title like expert or doctor. These small details can shape your entire perception of a person. The illusion of authority is one of the most powerful mind tricks ever discovered. People naturally trust those who look like they're in charge. A uniform, a podium, a confident tone. These cues bypass skepticism and trigger obedience, sometimes with terrifying consequences. Take the Milgram experiment. Participants were ordered to deliver electric shocks to a stranger. A man in a lab coat simply told them, The experiment must continue. And so they did. Even when the victim screamed. Even when they thought they were causing real harm. The mere presence of an authority figure made them ignore their own morals. This isn't just an experiment, it's a blueprint for manipulation. Politicians, CEOs, even con artists use the halo effect to their advantage. If someone sounds smart, we assume they are. If they dress the part, we trust them. If they speak with certainty, we stop questioning. And that's when we're most vulnerable. Because once we believe in an authority, we don't just trust their words. We obey them. We trust those who feel familiar, people who speak like us, move like us, even breathe like us. But what if that familiarity is being engineered? Mirroring is one of the most powerful psychological tricks, and most of the time, we don't even realize it's happening. When someone subtly copies your gestures, tone, or speech patterns, your brain interprets them as safe, as part of your tribe. It's instinctual, a survival mechanism wired deep in our subconscious. And the best manipulators know exactly how to exploit it. Cult recruiters and con artists use mirroring to create an instant, artificial sense of connection. A skilled scammer doesn't just tell you what you want to hear. They reflect who you are, subtly adjusting their energy to match yours. You lean forward, they lean forward. You cross your arms, they do the same. And before you know it, your defenses are lowered. You feel like they get you. Then there's pacing and leading, a two-step technique that starts by matching your current state before gently steering you where they want. A politician might begin a speech by expressing frustration about the same problems you're upset about. That's pacing. Once you're nodding in agreement, they shift, and that's why we need this solution. That's leading. And because they made you feel heard, you're far more likely to accept what comes next. Salespeople use this constantly. Ever had a car dealer agree with everything you say at first? Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. I totally understand. That's pacing. Then once they've built trust, they start guiding you toward a decision, leading. And suddenly, you're signing papers for a car you weren't even sure you wanted. But the real danger of mirroring and pacing isn't just in sales or politics, it's in personal relationships. A toxic person might start by becoming your perfect match. Your interests, your values, even your deepest fears, they reflect them all, making you believe you've finally found someone who truly understands you. But once you're emotionally invested, the mirroring stops. The control begins. So the next time you feel an instant connection with someone, ask yourself, is it real? Or is someone carefully crafting a reflection of you just to pull you in? A simple favor, a harmless request, just one small yes. That's all it takes to set a psychological trap. The foot in the door technique is a classic manipulation tactic. It works like this. Get someone to agree to a small request first. Something easy, something that seems insignificant. Then, when the bigger request comes, they're far more likely to comply. It's how scammers operate. They don't ask for your life savings right away. First, they just need your email. Then the small donation. Then a little more. Step by step, you're pulled deeper in. Governments and corporations use this trick too. Would you like to try this service for free? Would you sign this harmless petition? Would you just answer a short survey? Each small agreement rewires your brain, making it harder to say no when the real request arrives. Because once you've said yes, you want to stay consistent. You justify the next step. And before you realize it, you're in deeper than you ever intended. You walk into a car dealership and the salesperson immediately shows you a luxury model way out of your budget. $80,000, they say confidently. You laugh, shake your head. There's no way you can afford that. Then they guide you to another car, still expensive but much cheaper. $35,000, they say, and honestly, for the value, it's a steal compared to the first one. Suddenly, $35,000 doesn't seem so bad. It almost feels like a relief. But was it really your choice? This is the door-in-the-face technique, one of the most powerful manipulation tricks used in sales, negotiations, and even law enforcement. The idea is simple. Start with an extreme request, one that's almost guaranteed to be rejected. Then, immediately follow up with a smaller, more reasonable request. The contrast makes the second offer seem far more acceptable than it would have on its own. It's not just used in sales. Police interrogators sometimes start by suggesting the harshest possible sentence. You could be looking at 20 years in prison. The suspect panics, insists they don't deserve that. Then the interrogator leans in. Look, if you cooperate, maybe we can get this down to just 5. 5 still isn't great, but compared to 20? It sounds like mercy. Fundraisers do this too. A charity representative might ask, would you be willing to donate $500 to support this cause? You decline, of course, it's too much. Okay, they say, even $50 would help. Now, $50 seems like nothing in comparison, and you're far more likely to agree. Even in personal relationships, this trick shows up. Ever had someone ask for a huge favor first, only to settle for something much smaller? Hey, can you help me move this weekend? Well, could you at least help me pack some boxes? You feel like you're compromising when in reality, they never expected you to say yes to the first request. It was just a setup. The door-in-the-face technique works because of psychological reciprocity. When someone compromises by lowering their request, we feel obligated to meet them halfway. But in reality, we're just being guided toward the outcome they wanted all along. So the next time someone hits you with an outrageous demand before settling for something smaller, pause. Ask yourself, was that second request always the real goal? How many of your opinions are truly your own? The bandwagon effect is one of the most powerful forms of manipulation. When enough people seem to believe something, we assume it must be true. Even if it isn't. Even if we know deep down that something feels off. Social media engineers this effect at scale. Trending topics, like counts, fake engagement from bots. These aren't just numbers. They're psychological levers designed to make you feel like you're the only one who doesn't agree. And if enough people say something, even if it's a lie, your brain starts to doubt itself. The Asch conformity experiment proved this decades ago. In a simple test, participants were shown an obvious truth. One line was clearly longer than the others. But when actors in the experiment confidently insisted the shorter line was the longest, the real participants started to doubt their own eyes. They went along with the group, rejecting what they knew to be real. Now, imagine this playing out on a global scale. Manufactured trends, artificial outrage, carefully curated viral moments. The illusion of consensus is powerful enough to change elections, rewrite history, and turn lies into accepted reality. Because in the end, the scariest thing isn't that people believe something false. It's that they believe everyone else believes it too. Your brain craves resolution. A song that cuts off before the final note. A story that ends on a cliffhanger. A mystery that remains unsolved. It lingers in your mind, gnawing at your thoughts, demanding an answer. This is the need for closure, a deep psychological drive that makes unfinished situations feel unbearable. And once someone understands how much you crave certainty, they can use it to manipulate you in ways you never expected. Think about conspiracy theories. They often begin with an unanswered question: what really happened? But instead of presenting solid evidence, they weave a web of half-truths, vague hints, and suggestive questions. They don't want you to know the truth. The absence of a clear answer makes people desperate to fill in the blanks. So, they latch onto whatever explanation feels the most satisfying, even if it's completely fabricated. It's the same reason propaganda works. Political leaders don't need to offer real solutions. Just tell people that something is wrong and that the other side is hiding something from you. Your brain does the rest, connecting dots that might not even be there. Religions have long understood this too. The promise of an afterlife, a divine plan, a reason behind every tragedy. These ideas provide certainty in an uncertain world. Whether true or not, they satisfy the need for closure in a way that pure logic never could. Even marketing and sales rely on this. Ever seen an ad that teases a shocking truth but doesn't reveal it right away? You click the link, scroll through endless text, waiting for the answer. That tension, the feeling of not knowing, keeps you engaged. And in personal relationships, this trick is devastating. Ever had someone walk away without explaining why? A sudden breakup with no closure? That lingering uncertainty makes it harder to move on. Your brain keeps replaying the past, searching for an answer that may never come. The worst part? When people are desperate for closure, they'll accept any answer, even if it's a lie. Manipulators know this. They don't need to prove anything. They just need to create doubt. Confusion itself becomes a weapon. So, the next time you feel pulled toward a conspiracy, a mystery, or an unresolved situation, step back. Ask yourself, do I actually have enough information? Or am I just desperate to fill in the blanks? Because sometimes, the truth is that there is no truth. Only the illusion of certainty. What happens when reality contradicts what you want to believe? Cognitive dissonance is the deep psychological discomfort of holding two conflicting ideas. Your brain hates it. It will do almost anything to resolve the contradiction, even if it means lying to itself. Imagine someone who invests their life savings into a scam. They start seeing red flags. But instead of admitting they've been deceived, they convince themselves it must be real. Because the alternative, accepting that they were tricked, is too painful to bear. This is why cult members refuse to leave even after their leader is exposed. It's why people stay in toxic relationships, justifying the abuse instead of facing the truth. It's why some people reject new information that contradicts their beliefs, even when the evidence is undeniable. Governments, con artists, and even corporations exploit this mental weakness. They make you invest, not just money, but identity, emotions, and pride. The deeper you're in, the harder it becomes to admit you were wrong. Because in the battle between truth and emotional comfort, your brain will always choose the path of least resistance. And sometimes, that means defending the very lie that's keeping you trapped. People want to believe the world is fair, that hard work leads to success, that bad people are punished, and good people are rewarded. It's comforting. It makes life feel predictable. But reality isn't that simple. And this belief, the just world fallacy, can blind us to injustice. Think about the way people react to misfortune. When someone struggles financially, the knee-jerk response is often, they must not be working hard enough. When someone is scammed, people say, they should have been more careful. When a victim speaks out about abuse, some ask, why didn't they leave sooner? These responses aren't just cruel. They come from a deep psychological bias. If something bad happened, the victim must have done something to deserve it. Because if the world is fair, bad things don't just happen to good people. This fallacy is why people defend the powerful. When a billionaire succeeds, we assume they must have earned it. When a politician is exposed for corruption, many refuse to believe it. If a system is unfair, that means the world isn't as just as we want it to be. And accepting that feels too uncomfortable. Governments, Corporations and media outlets exploit this bias constantly. They frame poverty as a personal failing, not a systemic issue. They portray injustice as the fault of the oppressed, not the oppressors. Because as long as people believe the world is fair, they won't fight to change it. But here's the truth: the world is not fair. Bad things happen to good people. The powerful aren't always deserving, and the struggling aren't always at fault. The just world fallacy doesn't make life more just, it makes us blind to reality. And the moment you start questioning it, you begin to see the world as it truly is. Fear is a powerful motivator, and nothing fuels it quite like the thought of being left behind. The fear of missing out, or FOMO, isn't just a passing feeling. It's a carefully engineered psychological trigger designed to keep you chasing what you think you need. Limited time offers. Flash sales. Only 3 spots left. These aren't just marketing tactics, they're psychological traps. The moment you see something disappearing, your brain panics. What if I miss my chance? Even if you didn't want it before, now you need it. Social media exploits FOMO to perfection. Ever felt anxious seeing friends on vacation, at parties, or buying the latest trend? That's by design. Platforms make sure you see what you're missing, not just to keep you scrolling, but to make you crave what others have. Influencers use it too. They don't just sell products, they sell lifestyles. The message is always the same: if you don't have this, you're behind. And if you're behind, you better catch up before it's too late. Even the financial world isn't immune. Think of NFT drops, crypto booms, and viral stock trends. People don't invest because they believe in the value. They invest because everyone else is. And by the time they realize they've been manipulated, it's already too late. FOMO keeps you spending, chasing, and obsessing over things you don't need. And the worst part? The cycle never ends. Because the moment you catch up, there's always something new to miss out on. Control doesn't always come from force. The most effective way to manipulate a population is through their own minds. This is psychological warfare, the invisible battlefield where governments shape thoughts, emotions, and beliefs to maintain power. Throughout history, regimes have mastered this art. The Soviet Union erased people from photos, rewriting history in real time. Nazi Germany used propaganda to turn neighbors against each other. During the Cold War, both the US and the USSR planted misinformation to control public perception. Fear is the most powerful weapon. Create a threat, real or exaggerated, and people will trade their freedoms for security. This is why authoritarian governments thrive on fear campaigns. It's why the media is flooded with crises that keep people anxious, divided, and distracted. Misinformation is another tool. The truth doesn't need to be erased, just buried under an avalanche of conflicting narratives. When people don't know what to believe, they become passive, confused, easier to control. And today, psychological warfare has evolved. AI algorithms track your every move, curating what you see, think, and feel. Deepfake technology can fabricate reality itself. Social media bots amplify division, making people fight among themselves instead of questioning those in power. The battlefield is no longer fought with weapons, it's fought with information. And the moment you stop blindly consuming it, the moment you start questioning who benefits from the narratives you believe, that's the moment you begin to break free. People don't like being told what to do. The moment someone gives a command, a deep instinct kicks in: resistance. That's why reverse psychology is so powerful. Instead of forcing someone to act a certain way, it makes them want to do it. Parents use it all the time. Fine, don't eat your vegetables. I guess you don't want to grow strong. Suddenly, the child wants to prove them wrong. Salespeople do it too. This product probably isn't for you, it's more for professionals. Now, the customer feels challenged to prove they are the right fit. Even politics weaponizes it. Leaders dismiss a controversial idea, knowing their opponents will defend it just to oppose them. The illusion of free will. That's what makes reverse psychology work. Because people don't resist their own decisions. And once someone believes the choice was theirs, they never realize they were manipulated at all. Fear is one of the most primal emotions. It heightens awareness, triggers survival instincts, and makes rational thinking nearly impossible. And when fear is followed by sudden relief, the mind becomes unusually pliable, ready to accept whatever suggestion comes next. This is the fear-then-relief technique, a psychological trick designed to break your defenses when you're most vulnerable. Scammers use it all the time. You get a call from someone claiming to be the IRS, telling you there's a serious issue with your taxes. Your heart races. But then, just as panic sets in, they offer a way out. You can resolve this right now by making a simple payment over the phone. Police interrogations follow the same playbook. Suspects are pushed to their limits, subjected to relentless questioning, stress, and fear. Then, just when they're mentally exhausted, the interrogator switches tone, offering a way out, a confession in exchange for leniency. Even politicians and the media use this tactic. They flood headlines with fear-inducing crises, economic collapse, foreign threats, social chaos. Then they present themselves as the only ones who can fix it. The message is simple: panic. But trust me, I have the solution. When fear takes over, the brain prioritizes survival over logic. The relief that follows feels like clarity, but it's a setup, a manipulation, a way to make you accept something you normally wouldn't. The next time you feel an urgent wave of fear followed by an immediate sense of safety, pause. Ask yourself, am I being manipulated into making a decision I wouldn't otherwise make? Because in that moment, your mind is not entirely your own. You think people can see right through you, that your nervousness, guilt, or hesitation is obvious. But here's the truth, it's not. This is the illusion of transparency, the belief that others can perceive our thoughts and feelings more clearly than they actually can. Psychological studies show that we overestimate how much others can detect our emotions. You might feel like your anxiety is written all over your face, but to the outside world, you appear normal. This illusion makes us second-guess ourselves, assume people know what we're thinking, and even confess to things we weren't accused of. Manipulators exploit this weakness. Interrogators will stare in silence, watching as their target fidgets under imagined scrutiny. Without a single accusation, the suspect starts explaining, desperate to relieve the tension. Con artists use this trick too, making victims feel like they've already been caught, pushing them into compliance before they even question the situation. Guilt trippers use it in relationships. I know you're hiding something, they say, watching for any subtle reaction. And suddenly, you feel guilty, even if you've done nothing wrong. The reality? People don't know what you're thinking unless you tell them. The fear that they do is just another invisible chain, keeping you controlled. A small favor can change everything, not because of the act itself, but because of what it triggers in the mind. It's called the future favor technique, and it's based on a strange psychological quirk. When we do something for someone, we unconsciously feel more inclined to help them again in the future. This is the Ben Franklin effect in action. Franklin once said that the best way to make someone like you isn't to do them a favor, it's to get them to do a favor for you. It sounds backward, but once someone has helped you once, they subconsciously justify it. I must like this person, or I wouldn't have helped them. Businesses and salespeople exploit this constantly. Ever noticed how free trials work? A service offers you a free month. No risk, no commitment. But once you start using it, you feel a subtle obligation to keep it. They gave you something, you should return the favor, right? Even more dangerous is when people use this in personal relationships. A manipulator might do you a small kindness, lend you money, help you in a difficult moment, offer emotional support. But later, they remind you of it. I was there for you, now it's your turn to help me. Before you realize it, you're repaying a debt that was never meant to exist. The trick works because humans hate the feeling of unbalanced reciprocity. We don't like owing people things. Manipulators know this, and they make sure the ledger is always tilted in their favor. So the next time someone does you a favor, ask yourself, was this generosity, or was this an investment in controlling my future choices? Because if you're not careful, the smallest act of kindness can become a chain. Repetition is exhausting. It grinds down your defenses, making resistance feel pointless. And that's exactly why it works. This is the broken record tactic. A psychological trick used to wear people down through constant, unrelenting repetition. Marketers bombard you with last chance. Limited time only. Act now. Not because they expect you to act immediately, but because the more you see the message, the more it burrows into your mind. Eventually, resisting feels harder than just giving in. Interrogators use the same method. They repeat the same question over and over, reshaping it slightly each time. Are you sure that's what happened? Let's go over this again. Tell me one more time. It's not about getting new answers. It's about breaking the suspect's mental endurance until confessing feels like the only way out. In relationships, toxic people use this technique to manipulate. They demand the same thing over and over until the other person gives in just to stop the argument. They make refusal feel like a battle that never ends, where the only escape is surrender. The truth? Repetition doesn't make something right, it just makes it harder to resist. Everyone thinks they're special, smarter than most, a better driver, a better judge of character. But statistically, that's impossible. This is the illusion of superiority, a cognitive bias that convinces people they are above average, even when they aren't. In a famous study, 90% of drivers rated themselves as above average. But logically, only 50% of people can be in the top half. The same effect applies to intelligence, decision-making, and even morality. Most people believe they are less biased than others, that they make better choices, and that they are harder to fool. And that's exactly why they're easy to manipulate. Scam artists and con men love overconfidence. If you believe you're too smart to be tricked, you won't notice when it's happening. The overconfidence effect makes people take risks, ignore warning signs, and trust the wrong people. Gambling industries thrive on this bias. Every gambler believes they have a strategy, a gut feeling, an edge over the system. But casinos don't stay in business by losing money. The same goes for multi-level marketing schemes. Recruiters don't say, most people fail at this. They say, most people fail, but you're different. They feed your illusion of superiority, making you believe you'll be the exception. The truth? Manipulation works best on people who think they're immune to it. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, I'd never fall for that, pause. Because the more certain you are, the more vulnerable you might be. Being part of a group feels safe. It feels natural. But what if it also makes you stop thinking for yourself? This is the power of we, the psychological force that makes group identity override individual thought. When we identify with a group, whether it's a political party, a company, a religion, or even a sports team, our brains start to shift. We stop questioning. We stop analyzing. We just follow. Psychologists call this de-individuation, when people in groups lose their sense of personal responsibility. In a crowd, they'll cheer, riot, or even commit crimes they'd never consider alone. The group absorbs them. Cults use this tactic masterfully. New members are isolated from outsiders, given a new identity. We are the enlightened, they are the lost. The stronger the we, the weaker the individual becomes. Political leaders exploit it too. Us versus them rhetoric isn't just about division, it's about control. When people feel part of a cause, they accept extreme actions in its name. Suddenly, things they once found unthinkable become necessary for the greater good. Corporations do it as well. They don't just hire employees, they create cultures. We're a family. We hustle. We're different from the rest. And just like that, people start working longer hours, tolerating mistreatment, and sacrificing their personal lives. Not because they have to, but because they believe in the we. The scariest part? Once the group defines your reality, it becomes nearly impossible to see outside of it. It starts with something harmless. How's your day going? Nice weather, isn't it? Just small talk. Nothing unusual. But what if that simple exchange is a psychological trick to lower your defenses? This is the foot-in-mouth technique, a subtle but powerful way to increase trust, build rapport, and make people more compliant without them realizing it. Studies show that when someone first engages in casual conversation, they become more agreeable in follow-up interactions. The reason? We like to appear consistent. If you just told someone, "I'm doing great," your brain unconsciously aligns with that positivity. So when they ask for a favor, you're more likely to say yes to maintain that friendly dynamic. Salespeople and marketers use this constantly. They never open with, "Do you want to buy this?" Instead, they warm you up, "How's your day? You look like someone who appreciates quality." By the time they get to their actual pitch, your subconscious already sees them as friendly and trustworthy. Spies and intelligence agencies? They've mastered this. The easiest way to get someone talking is to make them comfortable. A simple conversation about their hometown, their interests, or even their coffee order makes them relax. And suddenly, they're revealing more than they intended. And it's not just spies. Interrogators, journalists, con artists, even pickup artists, they all use small talk as a weapon. Because when someone puts their foot in their mouth, when they've already opened up, it's hard to pull back. And that's when the real manipulation begins. You're watching a debate. The politician is asked a tough question. Instead of answering, they shift the focus, talking about a completely different issue. By the time they're done speaking, the original question is forgotten. This is the red herring trick, a classic misdirection technique designed to distract you from the real issue. It happens everywhere. In media, news cycles are flooded with trivial scandals while major policies slip by unnoticed. A celebrity controversy explodes, and suddenly, nobody's talking about government surveillance laws quietly being passed. In criminal investigations, suspects throw red herrings to mislead detectives. They provide false leads, extra details, or exaggerated emotions to create confusion and divert attention. Even magicians use this technique. While your eyes follow the left hand, the right hand pulls off the trick. The scariest part? Red herrings work because the human brain craves stories. Once a compelling distraction is introduced, people instinctively follow the narrative, even if it leads them away from the truth. By the time they realize it, it's too late. Imagine waking up one day and realizing you've been manipulated, but the worst part is, you didn't even notice it happening. It wasn't a sudden shock. It wasn't an obvious trick. It was a slow, gradual process that rewired how you think, what you believe, and how you behave. This is the darkest psychological trick of all. The kind of manipulation that goes unnoticed until it's too late. The most powerful psychological manipulations are the ones you don't see coming. Long-term conditioning shapes everything from your habits to your identity, and you may never question it. Let's start with advertising. Brands don't sell just products, they sell beliefs. Over time, you've been conditioned to believe certain things about yourself and the world. Ads don't just show you a picture of a product. They plant an idea in your mind, repeatedly, until you think it's your own thought. "I need that," you say to yourself, when in reality, you've been subtly guided to that conclusion. It doesn't end with marketing. Politics uses the same slow burn method. Over the years, certain narratives become so ingrained in society that they shape your worldview without you realizing it. You're told how to think, how to vote, what's right, and what's wrong, until it becomes second nature. The chilling part of this psychological trick is when you finally realize it's happening. By then, your brain has already accepted these beliefs as your truth. Trying to change your mind after years of conditioning feels like fighting an invisible force. The manipulations have been woven into the very fabric of your consciousness. And here's the darkest idea. By the time you ask yourself, "Am I being manipulated?" it could already be too late. You're already deeply entrenched in the web, so entwined with the beliefs, behaviors, and identities you've been conditioned to adopt that breaking free feels impossible. In the end, the most sinister manipulation is the one that never leaves a trace, the one that feels so natural, so familiar, you never even question it. Until you do. You notice a pattern. The same arguments, the same justifications, the same emotional traps, playing out over and over again. This is a psychological loop, a self-reinforcing cycle designed to keep you trapped in a belief, a system, or a relationship. It happens in toxic relationships. An abuser mistreats their partner, then apologizes, showers them with affection, and promises change. The cycle repeats, but each time, it becomes harder to leave. It happens in cults and extremist groups. Doubt is discouraged, critical thinking is shut down, and members are made to feel guilty for even questioning the narrative. They're told that leaving would mean betraying their family or losing everything they've built. And it happens in propaganda. A false belief is reinforced through repetition. Every new piece of information is filtered through that belief. When confronted with evidence that contradicts it, the believer doubles down. Because admitting they were wrong means admitting they were manipulated. This is the sunk cost fallacy at work. The more someone invests, emotionally, financially, or mentally, the harder it is to walk away. The most dangerous loops are the ones that feel inescapable. By the time people realize they're in one, they've already given too much to let go. You walk into a store, looking for a new phone. The salesperson shows you two models, one slightly cheaper, the other with better features. You pick one, feeling like you made the choice. But what if both options were carefully selected to make you spend money, while other, better alternatives were never even presented? This is forced choice, a psychological trick designed to give you the illusion of control while steering you toward a predetermined outcome. It's not about choosing freely, it's about choosing from a limited set of options that someone else has crafted for you. Think about elections. You're given two candidates, two parties, two choices. But what if both options already serve the same system? What if the real choice, the one that could change everything, isn't even on the table? Governments, corporations, and manipulators of all kinds use this trick constantly. You see it in contracts, in politics, in business deals. Take it or leave it. Choose A or B. But in reality, the moment you accept the framing of the choice, you've already lost. Real freedom doesn't come from picking between limited options. It comes from questioning the choices themselves. You feel a knot in your stomach, a quiet, nagging sense that you've done something wrong. But what if that guilt was planted there on purpose? Manipulators weaponize guilt to make people comply with their demands. After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me? If you really cared, you wouldn't say no. These phrases aren't just expressions of disappointment, they're tools of control. This works because guilt is a deeply uncomfortable emotion. We crave relief from it. And the easiest way to relieve guilt? Giving in. This is how toxic partners keep their victims trapped. The guilt relief cycle. They make you feel bad for setting a boundary. Then, when you finally cave, they act like they're forgiving you. In reality, they're reinforcing the idea that disobedience leads to guilt, and obedience leads to peace. It happens in sales tactics. The free sample trick creates a sense of obligation. You feel bad taking something for nothing, so you buy. It happens in religion. People are told they were born sinners and need to repent to be accepted. A cycle of guilt and absolution is used to keep them devoted. The truth is, real love, respect, and generosity don't come with strings attached. When guilt is being used as a leash, the real question is, who's holding it? You open your phone, intending to check just one notification, but minutes turn into hours, scrolling endlessly, unable to stop. But this isn't an accident. Social media algorithms are designed to hijack your brain. They analyze your every move, learning what keeps you engaged, what triggers emotions, and what makes you stay. Every like, comment, and pause tells the algorithm exactly how to manipulate you. Dopamine-driven loops keep you coming back for more, much like a slot machine. Random rewards, a viral video, a surprising post, a burst of likes, hook your brain into addiction. But it's not just about keeping you entertained. These algorithms don't just show you content. They shape your beliefs. By reinforcing what you already like, they create echo chambers, making it seem like everyone thinks the way you do. Over time, this warps reality, pushing people into extreme opinions, manufactured outrage, and engineered division. Worst of all, you might never realize it's happening. You think you're freely choosing what to read, watch, and believe, but in reality, an AI-driven system is choosing for you. You wake up, check your phone, and scroll through your feed. The posts you see, the news you read, even the arguments you engage in, were they truly your choice? Or were they carefully selected, shaped, and reinforced by forces you can't even see? This is the self-sustaining nature of manipulation, where those who spread certain ideas believe they are acting freely, but in reality, they are just passing down a script that was given to them. Think about history. Societies have always been shaped by shared narratives, beliefs about morality, success, identity. But what if these beliefs weren't organic? What if they were planted, repeated, and strengthened over generations until they became self-replicating? Even those who believe they've broken free from mainstream conditioning might just be trapped in a different illusion, one designed to feel like rebellion while still serving the same hidden agenda. The terrifying reality? By the time you start questioning the system may have already prepared an answer for you.